Now that we've cast on, it's time to start the border. You could do your entire blanket in one stitch, the knit stitch or the purl stitch or whatever stitch you decide to use. However, if you only do one stitch, you're going to have one problem. Your blanket is going to curl on the sides and your blanket's going to curl at the bottom. That's why my blanket pattern is going to have a border with multiple stitches. We're going to use 2 stitches on our entire blanket. We're going to use the E-wrapped knit stitch and we're going to do a purl stitch. To make the border, we're going to have 16 rows of alternating knit stitch and then a row of purl stitch. If you have a stitch counter, now would be the time to grab it. If not, just grab yourself a piece of paper and a pen so you can keep track of which number of rows that you're on. It's going to be very easy. If you think about reading a book, every time you go from left to right, just like you read, that's going to be our knit stitch row. Every single peg is going to be a knit stitch. That's going to be when we go from left to right. When we turn around and go the other direction from right to left, that's when the pattern's going to come in. But for our first row, it's going to be all knit stitch. So here is how you knit stitch. All of our odd rows will be a knit stitch. Again, going from left to right, just like you read a book. So that'll be easy to remember. That's the easiest row and reading. So right now, we're on peg 164 on my pattern for the crib blanket, and this is where your yarn is. If you ever forget, oh my goodness, did I actually do that peg or not? Your yarn is always to the back of the peg that you just completed. So if you have to put it down for a second for any reason, and then you come back and you're like, oh no, I don't know where I was, your completed stitch, your last completed stitch is where the yarn is. So 164 is my last completed stitch. So we're going to start the knit stitch. You're going to bring your yarn between your last and your next to last. So we'll call this our new peg number 1 because it's the very end before we turn around. So there we are right there. And we're going to bring it between those two and we're going to wrap it around from front to back. And then we're going to take our loop, we're going to yarn over. All right. So now we're in the back. We're going to just make the E-wrap stitch going in the other direction. This is going to be our knit stitch. So we are in the back of that last peg. We're going to bring it around the back of number 2, give them a hug, and wrap it around the front. And we're going to yarn over. Bring our yarn behind number 3, give them a little hug, wrap it to the front, and yarn over. You're going to repeat this stitch for all of your pegs until you go back to the beginning. So that's where we are. I'm going to give you a couple more examples and then I'm going to pause and let you all catch up. So again, around the back, cross it to the front. Now you have 2 loops, yarn over to the top, and always remember to push it down. So again, behind, in front, yarn over. Behind, wrap it in front, and yarn over. So I will see you back when you get all of your first row of knit stitches completed. Here we are, right back at the beginning at our very first peg where we started. When you got to this one, remember there was 2 loops at the bottom because that was our place where we put our slip knot. You just take those bottom 2 loops, flip it over, so you're left with 1 loop at the end. And this is where we start our next stitch. This one's called the purl stitch. It looks a lot more difficult than it really is. A couple practices and you're gonna have it down pat. It's actually my favorite stitch to do. It's fun. So again, we're alternating rows right now. We're gonna do 18 rows. We just completed our first one left to right with our knit stitch. Now we're going from right to left. So you think of reverse reading. So reading backwards, and this is where you're gonna do your purl stitch. And again, we're gonna alternate rows. We're gonna do 16 rows, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl. So this is pretty easy. What you do is we just ended. Remember, I said when you end, your yarn is on the peg where you last stitched. So we're gonna bring him over here. We're gonna bring him over onto the right side. This time, you're gonna take your hook, and you see how there's a little groove there? You're going to slide your hook into the groove and you're going to pull your yarn forward a little bit. You're going to take this working yarn and put it in front of that peg. Now, this is the tricky part. You're going to twist your hook backwards so it's still in the little groove, and you're going to pull the yarn through. Then you're going to take it, and this is scary, I know. You're going to you make your loop big so you have something to hold on to. You're going to slip off your yarn. And that first one's tight. It's always tight, so I kind of get my hook in there to help me. You're going to slip that whole loop off. Oh, it's floating. And then you're going to take your new loop and you're going to put it on and you're going to pull it. All right, let's try that again. So it's to the right side of the peg that you're working on. Put your hook down through that groove, pull out your yarn a little bit, cross the working yarn in front, twist the hook back, and pull that working yarn through, making the loop. Take off the existing loop, put on your new one. You are purling. Take your hook, put it down through the groove, pull the yarn forward, put your working yarn back there, twist, pull, remove, replace. All right, you're gonna get it, I promise. Couple practices. Down through the groove, pull forward, bring the working yarn in front, twist it, grab that working yarn, pull it, take the loop off, put the new loop on. One more time for you. Down through the groove, pull it forward, put the working yarn in front, twist the hook, pull the working yarn, take it off, put it back on. That is your purl row. Going from right to left, we're going to purl everything all the way back to peg 164. The reason that you alternate is if you did all one stitch, you're constantly pulling your yarn in one direction. That's what causes the curling to happen, whether it's on the sides or the bottom. So by doing this alternating rows, the alternating rows create something called a garter stitch. And a garter stitch is just a row of knit, a row of purl, a row of knit, a row of purl. And it gives you a really pretty border. So all the way back to peg 164. By the time you get there, you're going to be a pro at that purl stitch. I'll see you there. And we will continue to create our border. Well, here we are. We are finished with our purl. You got the hang of it by now after doing all of those? I bet you're a pro. Well, here we are, and we've completed that purl row, so we're back to a knit row now. So our yarn is in the back because we've completed that stitch on that peg. But since it's our beginning peg in the back, we're just going to wrap it to the front. And this entire row is going to be that knit stitch again. So go around the back, bring it to the front, yarn over, back to the front, and yarn over. A complete row of knit. Remember, we're reading again from from left to right, so that's our entire row of knit. And then we come back, we'll do purl, forward knit, backwards purl. So we get all 16 rows done to complete our border. When you have all of those border rows done, stop back and we're going to talk about the pattern for the bulk of our blanket so we can have a border on the left side and the right side so the sides don't curl either. I hope you're enjoying the tutorial so far. I look forward to seeing your borders. My Facebook group is Imagine That by Lori, and I encourage you to stop by my Facebook group and post a picture of your blanket so far. I'd love to see your progress. Thank you.